They say every family has a favorite. In mine, it was never a secret. It was broadcast like the evening news. I'm Sienna. I'm 28. I got married last year in a small vineyard wedding just outside of Asheville. It was the kind of day I'd always dreamed about. Warm breeze, wildflowers, the man I love holding my hand and tearing up during our vows. Sounds perfect, right? It was. Except for one thing. My parents didn't show up. Let me say that again. My own mom and dad skipped their eldest daughter's wedding. No car trouble, no emergency. They just didn't come. And the reason, apparently, I committed the unpardonable sin of getting married before my sister. Yep, that's the level of absurdity we're working with here. My sister Delilah is 26 and the undisputed queen of the family. Tall, slim, corporate success meets Instagram model. She's the kind of woman who makes walking through an airport look like a Vogue runway. She has this energy that makes people orbit her like she's the sun and we're all just warm, grateful planets. Me, I'm not that. I'm 5'2", curvy, quiet. I work in early childhood education and I bake when I'm stressed. I've always felt like the backstage crew to her main character energy. My parents, Carol and Jeff, adored her. Not just the regular we love our kids equally but differently kind of way. No, they adored her, worshipped her even. If Delilah got a cold, it was DEFCON 1 in the household. If I got strep throat, drink some tea and sleep it off, honey. But I tried. God, I tried so hard over the years to win their affection. I got decent grades, stayed out of trouble, helped around the house, got a job straight out of college. I'd show them my classroom photos, talk about my kids, share silly stories. They'd smile politely and then immediately pivot to Delilah's latest business milestone. New client, promotion, feature in some magazine article. It always went back to her. So when I got engaged to Theo, my boyfriend of 4 years, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the moment they'd finally see me. Maybe they'd realize I was building something beautiful too. We sent out the invites, both paper and digital. Theo double-checked every address. We called and texted family to make sure they knew the dates. When my parents didn't RSVP, I called. No answer. I left a voicemail trying to sound cheerful, reminding them about the venue details and how much it would mean if they came. Silence. Then the wedding day arrived. Theo's family flew in from 3 states away. My cousin Mia drove 10 hours to be there. My parents no-show, not even a text. I remember scanning the crowd as I walked down the aisle, searching for them like some lost kid in a department store. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it still knocked the air out of me. The whole ceremony, I felt like there was this invisible crater behind me where they should have been sitting. Afterward, people asked, "Where's Carol? Where's Jeff?" I smiled and said they must have had something urgent come up. I lied, because I still wanted to protect them. A few days later, I got my answer. I called them finally. Carol picked up. Her voice was cool, slightly offended. She launched into how hurt they were. They were hurt because apparently they never got an invitation. "Excuse me." I froze. For a second, I actually doubted myself. Had we missed them? Was there a mistake? I hung up and immediately checked the wedding list. There it was. Carol and Jeff listed under confirmed delivery for both physical and email invites. I even found the RSVP email that was opened by their address. So they were lying, boldly, casually, like it was just another Tuesday. When I told Theo, he didn't even look surprised. They skipped it because of Delilah, he said. They didn't want to upset her. I blinked. "You think it's because I got married first?" He nodded. Then he told me something that made my skin go cold. At our engagement party months earlier, one they did attend, he noticed them huddled in a corner on the phone. When he approached, they quickly put it away. But not before he heard muffled sobs. It was Delilah, crying. Over what, my engagement? Apparently, she'd told them she felt replaced and abandoned because I was getting married before her. My parents were comforting her, whispering reassurance while I was across the room, smiling with guests and cutting cake. Theo didn't tell me at the time because he didn't want to ruin the night. I wish he had. Or maybe I don't. I'm not sure. But it made everything make sense in the worst way. They chose her feelings over my milestone. My heart sank. I had always known I wasn't the favorite. But this wasn't just favoritism. This was a clear message: you don't matter as much. And here's where it gets messy. Because I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I didn't post some dramatic Facebook rant. I just stopped pretending. I started telling the truth when people asked. Every time a relative asked about the wedding and mentioned how strange it was my parents weren't there, I told them what I knew. I wasn't malicious about it. I didn't embellish. I just said, apparently they didn't want to hurt Delilah's feelings by attending. No drama, just facts. Apparently those facts traveled. Now Delilah's engaged. Good for her. Their wedding is supposedly going to be some $100,000 affair with imported roses and a live harpist. But here's the twist: no one wants to go. I've been getting message after message from aunts, uncles, and cousins. We're skipping it. After what they did to you? No thanks. Tell Delilah congrats, but we're busy that weekend. It's not because I asked them to. I never once told anyone to boycott. They just chose sides. Not because I'm perfect, but because the truth hit home. And now my parents are furious. Last week, my mom called and said, "You've ruined our reputation. No one's coming to Delilah's wedding because of your gossip." I laughed. Honestly, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Because if telling the truth about how you treated your own daughter ruins your reputation, maybe the problem isn't me. So now I'm the villain. At least that's the role my parents have cast me in. Funny, isn't it? All those years I tried to win their approval to be the daughter they could proudly talk about. Now that I've finally stopped chasing their validation and started living my truth, they're calling me the family saboteur. After my mom's phone call where she flat out accused me of ruining Delilah's wedding, I didn't respond with rage or tears. I just listened. That more than anything seemed to throw her off. I think she was expecting me to argue or beg for forgiveness. But I had nothing to prove anymore. She kept going, though. Told me I'd been planting poison in the family for months, that my bitterness was driving people away. Her words, not mine. I let her talk, repeating phrases like "we did everything for you and your sister never asked to be compared." At one point, she actually said, "You've always been jealous, haven't you?" And something inside me snapped. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Just this quiet, sharp click like a door closing forever. I said yes, I was jealous, not because she's prettier or smarter or has a better job, but because you've never even pretended to love me the way you love her. Silence. A real heavy kind of silence that buzzed in my ear. Then she scoffed and told me I was being overly sensitive. Classic move. Years of being gaslit into thinking I was the one overreacting. I could have said more. I could have reminded her of all the small moments, the ones that cut deepest. Like the time I made honor roll and she told me not to brag because Delilah had just won her regional debate tournament. Or when I got promoted and she responded with, "That's nice, but did you hear Delilah might get relocated to Europe instead?" I said, "I'm done." And I meant it. No long explanations, no guilt-soaked apologies. I ended the call. Later that evening, I told Theo everything. Every word, every sigh, every accusation. He listened without interrupting, then said, "They're panicking because for the first time you're not playing along." He was right. My silence had always been their shield. Now that I was speaking even softly, the truth became unbearable for them. But the part that hit me hardest, they weren't upset because they hurt me. They were upset because other people knew they hurt me. That's when I realized my parents aren't ashamed of what they did. They're ashamed of being seen for who they really are. Meanwhile, Delilah finally reached out. She sent me a long, syrupy text message dripping in fake concern. Said she wished we could talk and that family is too important to lose over misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. That word again. The one people use when they don't want to take responsibility. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew she didn't really want to hear it. A few days later, she went a step further. She texted Theo, told him she was worried about me, that I'd been twisting the truth and turning the family against each other. She even asked him to talk some sense into me. That made us both laugh. Theo doesn't take orders from anyone, least of all my sister, who spent years pretending he didn't exist unless it was to make some backhanded comment about his job or his clothes. He didn't respond either, but we screenshotted it, just in case. Then came the group chat. One of our cousins, Jasmine, created it to coordinate wedding travel. Almost every female cousin was in it, along with a couple of the uncles' wives. The thread started strong. Delilah's name in big, sparkly letters, photos of venues, links to gift registries. But within a few days, people started quietly exiting the chat. One by one. No explanations, just gone. Jasmine posted, "Hey everyone, can we please keep the drama out of this group?" And someone, bless her heart, replied, "It's not drama if it's the truth. I don't know who said it." The message was deleted within minutes, but the exodus continued. Apparently, the truth had done what years of silent resentment couldn't, shifted the loyalty lines. I wasn't asking anyone to boycott. I hadn't messaged a single person to tell them what to do. I'd simply answered questions honestly. And somehow honesty had more impact than all my sister's curated perfection ever could. My parents started damage control mode, of course, reaching out to extended relatives trying to rewrite the narrative. "Sienna's just going through a rough patch," they'd say. "She's been acting out since the wedding." Acting out. Because apparently choosing not to pretend anymore is a tantrum. Some of our relatives told me directly what was being said. Others sent supportive texts. And a few quietly sent me voice notes just saying, "I believe you." Those messages. They healed something in me. Not because I needed validation, but because they reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I'd felt all those years. The best part, I didn't even have to lift a finger. My parents were unraveling their own story without my help. All I did was let the cracks show, and people looked inside. Delilah's wedding was still months away, but the momentum had already shifted. Vendors were being booked, dresses ordered, invitations printed, but the buzz was gone. My parents were spending big, planning, big, talking, big, but the energy flat, forced, like they were trying to hype a movie no one wanted to see. And me, for the first time, I wasn't watching from the shadows. I was building something else, something real, a quiet kind of freedom, the kind that doesn't need revenge, just space and truth. A few weeks later, I got another call from my mom. This time, she didn't sound angry, just tired. Her voice had that brittle edge, like she'd been holding herself together with tape and good intentions. She asked if we could meet in person, said she just wanted to talk to clear the air. For a moment, I hesitated. I mean, what was left to clear? But curiosity won, or maybe it was that little sliver of hope I hadn't managed to kill off completely. So I agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Neutral territory, no family photos staring down from the walls, no memories to trip over. Just the low hum of an espresso machine and strangers who didn't know our history. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally. Worn out. I ordered tea. She didn't order anything. Just sat down and launched into it. Said she felt like the family was falling apart. Said she didn't understand why I'd tell people such hurtful things. I looked at her and said, "Because they were true." She flinched, like the word itself had teeth. "But did you have to say it like that?" she asked. "Did you have to tell everyone?" That's when I realized, again, it wasn't the actions that bothered her. It was the exposure. The discomfort of no longer being able to curate a flawless image. I told her I never intended to start a war, that I only answered what people asked. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't gossip. I just stopped covering for them. She said Delilah was heartbroken, that she cried every day because our relatives were pulling out of her wedding, that her fiancé was asking questions and she didn't know how to explain. I sipped my tea and asked, "Did she cry when you missed my wedding?" She didn't answer, just stared down at her hands. I told her the truth that I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's celebration. I had my own. I just wanted to be seen, for once. Not compared, not dismissed, just seen. She started crying. Not loud sobs, but the kind of tears that come from somewhere deeper. The kind you can't fake. And I felt a tiny flicker of guilt, which made me angry at myself. Because even now, after everything, I still wanted to comfort her. I still wanted her to love me. She said she didn't know how things got so bad, that she thought we were just different people with different strengths, and she didn't realize I felt so forgotten. I told her it wasn't just about feeling forgotten. It was about being erased. And then gaslit for noticing. She tried to defend herself, saying things like, "We were just trying to protect Delilah's feelings, and you've always been the strong one." As if being quiet about pain was a badge of honor. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. And then I said something that even surprised me. "I'm not angry anymore," I told her. "I'm just done pretending it didn't happen." That was it. I wasn't looking for an apology. I wasn't trying to change her mind. I just needed to say it out loud for myself. We sat there in silence for a while. When I finally stood up to leave, she reached for my hand and said, "Please don't stay a stranger." And I said I won't. But I'm also not going back to the version of me who needed to beg for crumbs. She nodded, slowly. And I walked out feeling more clear-headed than I had in years. Not healed, but steady. That night, I told Theo everything. He didn't say much, just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "I'm proud of you." And it landed so softly that I almost cried. Not because I was sad, but because it felt good to finally have someone who chose me on purpose. A couple of days later, my Aunt Nora came by with a box of old photos. She'd heard about the tension and wanted to drop off some memories she thought I should have. Inside were pictures from childhood birthday parties, school plays, summer vacations, and in so many of them, I was there just blurred out in the background, half-cropped. Always the extra, always the afterthought. But something else stood out. In the ones where I wasn't edited out by framing or distance, I was smiling. Really smiling. Like I hadn't yet learned to dim myself. It reminded me that I hadn't always been this quiet version of myself. I used to laugh loudly. I used to take up space. I didn't realize how much I missed that girl. So I pinned one of those photos to my fridge. A reminder not of the pain, but of who I was before I started shrinking. Meanwhile, wedding updates kept trickling in through the grapevine. Delilah's venue had changed twice. Some vendors had dropped out. My parents were stressed trying to manage everything. Delilah had apparently gone on a social media detox after too many people commented vague things like, "Hope this wedding works out better than the last one you skipped." Part of me wanted to feel smug, but mostly I just felt neutral, like I was watching a storm move past someone else's house. One of my cousins, Lena, called me and said, "You know what's wild? We're all finally admitting what we've known for years. They always treated you differently. We just didn't know what to do about it." That sentence hit like a soft slap. It stung, but it also made me feel validated. I wasn't the only one who saw it. They all had. They just stayed silent, too. Now silence was no longer fashionable. The truth had caught up. The masks were slipping. And there I was, not even trying to lead a rebellion, just being honest. And somehow that was louder than any speech. Delilah hadn't contacted me since that weak attempt through Theo, which was fine. I didn't need another lecture dressed up as a peace offering. I was slowly rebuilding my life in small, intentional ways. A new painting in the living room, a garden in the backyard, brunch with friends who didn't make me feel second best. Theo and I even started talking about a road trip. Just us, no expectations, no performance, just air and music and whatever scenery we passed. I hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. It wasn't about revenge anymore, or justice, or making them see my worth. It was about reclaiming what I'd lost. Not from them, but from myself. I had spent too many years trying to be the good daughter, the bigger person, the one who didn't make waves. But waves aren't bad. Sometimes they wash away the things that were never built to last. And I was finally learning to float. 3 weeks before Delilah's wedding, I got a group text from my dad. It was short. Just a forwarded evite and a one-liner. Would mean a lot if you came. No greeting, no context, no acknowledgement of anything that had happened. Just an expectation as if showing up would somehow patch everything up with glitter and good intentions. I stared at the screen for a while. Theo was making dinner humming to some old indie track in the kitchen. I thought about calling my dad and telling him everything I wanted to say, but then I realized I'd already said it. And he hadn't listened then. He wouldn't now. So I didn't reply. 2 days later, he texted again. This time it was longer. He said that families fight, that things get said in the heat of the moment, that Delilah was hurting and needed her sister there. He even used the word forgive, but not directed at himself. At me. He said he hoped I could forgive and forget. That's when I understood he still didn't get it. He wasn't asking me to show up because he missed me. He wanted a photo op, one smiling daughter to balance the frame. To him, forgiveness was a tool for convenience, not healing. I showed the message to Theo, and he asked, "Do you want to go?" I shook my head. I don't want to be a guest at a performance. I want to be a person. So we left it at that, and I moved on. The next week, Theo and I went hiking, nothing dramatic, just a simple trail with tall pines, and that earthy silence that feels like a reset button for your soul. At the top of the hill, with the wind pulling at my jacket, I looked out at the landscape and felt something shift. Not a dramatic moment, just clarity, the kind that sinks in slow and stays. I wasn't angry anymore, not even disappointed. I had let go of the version of my life where my parents would one day wake up and see me for who I was. I wasn't the side character. I wasn't the mistake. I just wasn't theirs in the way they wanted. And that was okay. A few days after that, my cousin Lena texted me. She said she and a few others had decided not to attend the wedding. Not out of loyalty to me, she clarified, but because they didn't feel right celebrating people who were so careless with someone they claimed to love. I told her I appreciated it, but that they didn't owe me anything. "You don't get it," she replied. "This isn't just about you. It's about how they've treated all of us. You were just the first one to say it out loud." That caught me off guard. I'd spent so long thinking I was the outlier, the black sheep, the sensitive one. But maybe I was just the mirror that made everyone else look twice. And people don't like mirrors that show them things they'd rather ignore. The morning of Delilah's wedding arrived quietly. No drama, no ominous texts, just sunlight streaming through the windows and Theo offering me pancakes. I stayed in pajamas all day, watched reruns of nature documentaries, read half a novel, and dozed off during a thunderstorm. It was the most peaceful Saturday I'd had in years. But around dusk, my phone started buzzing. Texts, missed calls, even a couple of voicemails. Apparently, there had been drama. Big drama. At the reception, one of the cousins made a comment during her toast about how sometimes the loudest families hide the darkest truths. It wasn't even directed at anyone specifically, but Delilah took it personally. She stormed off mid-dinner. My dad tried to calm her down, but they ended up arguing. Loudly. In front of guests. Someone recorded it. The clip made its way to our family group chat. It was 30 seconds of tension so thick you could chew it. My mom was crying, my dad looked furious, and Delilah was shouting something about being abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I didn't share the video. I didn't comment on it. I just watched it once, then deleted it. I wasn't going to be part of their unraveling. I'd already written my own ending. The following day, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying she was sorry. Not specific, not personal, Just sorry things got so out of hand. Then she asked if we could talk. I saved the message, but I didn't call back. Not because I wanted revenge, but because some wounds need air, not more talking. You can't build peace over rotting foundations. Later that week, I found a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized my dad's penmanship immediately. Inside, he wrote about how watching everything fall apart at the wedding made him realize just how broken things already were. He admitted they should have come to mine. Said it wasn't about Delilah, but about their own pride, their need to control the story. He said they didn't know how to love me the way I needed, and by the time they realized it, I had already stopped asking. That line stuck with me. I had stopped asking. Quietly, without announcement, just turned the volume down on my expectations until there was nothing left but silence. And in that silence, I had found peace. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need it to move forward. I'd already forgiven them, not for their sake, for mine. Because carrying that weight around had become too exhausting. And letting go didn't mean letting them back in. It just meant setting myself free. Theo and I planned a small getaway. Nothing fancy. A lakeside cabin, just us and a few paperbacks, board games, and a hammock. We didn't talk about weddings or families. We just existed. Quietly. Fully. And as I sat on that porch with my feet up, coffee in hand, and birds singing their tiny songs, I realized I wasn't missing anything. Not the drama, not the approval, not even the apology. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. Sometimes it comes from building something new on your own terms, and that's exactly what I was doing. A month passed after the wedding chaos, and surprisingly, things went quiet. No more calls, no guilt-laced messages. It felt strange at first, like the hush after a long storm, unnerving but calm. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. Instead, life went on. I went back to work, kids in the classroom laughing and chasing paint-stained dreams. Theo and I spent more evenings curled up on the couch, eating takeout and debating documentaries. It was quiet, normal, and I found myself smiling more often than not without noticing. One Friday afternoon, I ran into Aunt Maya at the farmer's market. She's my mom's older sister, always the observant one, the silent watcher in every family gathering. We hugged polite and warm, and she invited me to sit at the coffee booth tucked behind the cheese stalls. She didn't waste time. "You know," she said, stirring her iced latte, "I never thought your parents would lose you." But they did. Not because you walked away, because they never held on in the first place. I didn't know what to say, but I didn't have to. She nodded like she understood. "I always saw it," she added. "You were easy to overlook only if you were looking in the wrong direction." Her words stayed with me. They settled in my chest like smooth stones, weighty, grounding, but not painful. It was the first time an adult in my family had acknowledged it out loud. And for once, I didn't feel the need to justify my feelings. That evening, I told Theo about it, and he smiled. It's wild how simple truth sounds when someone finally says it. He was right. All this time, I'd been wrestling with doubt, wondering if I'd imagined the favoritism, the hierarchy, the imbalance. But I hadn't. And now the silence of denial was being replaced by quiet acknowledgement. Not from everyone, but from enough. Then something unexpected happened. Delilah posted a long captioned photo on her social media. A wedding picture, just her and her husband standing by a lake at sunset. But the words underneath weren't her usual curated grace. They were raw, honest. She talked about family tension, how perfection had been her armor, how she'd struggled with feeling abandoned during her own wedding. She didn't name me, but I felt it. Every word. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or defensiveness, just clarity. Her experience wasn't mine. Her pain didn't erase mine, and mine didn't erase hers. They could exist side by side without competing. I thought about messaging her. I opened the app, hovered over the comment box, but I closed it. Not because I didn't care, but because some bridges need to rebuild themselves. Forced crossings only lead to more collapse. 2 days later, I received a letter from her. A real one with stamps and a slightly smudged return address. I opened it slowly, half expecting sarcasm, but found none. She apologized. Said she hadn't realized how much space she took up until I finally stepped out of her shadow. She admitted that for years she enjoyed being the center, that it felt good, addictive even. But then she wrote something that caught me. I thought I was the one being seen, but maybe I was just the one being used to distract from everything our family didn't want to face. That line hit deep because it made me realize something I hadn't considered. She wasn't just the favorite. She was the scapegoat's mirror image, the golden child shaped to shine so brightly that nobody noticed the cracks around her. I sat with that letter for hours, reread it 3 times. Then I placed it next to the one from my dad, tucked away, not forgotten, not forgiven yet, but seen. I didn't reply, not yet. But I no longer felt the need to block her out. It was strange. Healing doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with a parade. It arrives like morning light, soft, persistent, barely noticeable, until suddenly everything looks different. I was beginning to see my life through that lens. The way Theo looked at me with zero comparison in his eyes. The way my students ran into my arms every Monday. The way friends called me to ask how I was, not why I was distant. I started painting again, nothing professional, just abstract swirls of emotion on canvas, color without expectation. And I found myself humming while I worked without meaning to. The house began to feel more like a home, not just a shared space, but a sacred one. One afternoon, while dusting, I found an old photo of me and Delilah as kids. We were sitting on a swing, her arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning with missing teeth. I stared at it for a long time. That version of us, the innocent, untainted bond before the hierarchy, before the divide, still lived somewhere in memory. And maybe that was enough. Maybe I didn't need a reunion. Maybe I just needed to forgive the little girls we were for becoming the sisters we didn't know how to be. That night, I lit a candle. Not for drama, not for ritual, just for presence. I whispered a quiet goodbye to the family I had tried so hard to fit into, and a soft welcome to the one I was choosing now, one built on truth, balance, and mutual respect. Theo joined me on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. No big talk, just stillness. The kind that comes when you finally stop running, not because you're tired, but because you've found where you're meant to stand. As the moon rose, I felt no bitterness, no weight, just breath, and the unmistakable peace of becoming whole without needing anyone else's permission to exist. 6 months after Delilah's wedding, I got an unexpected package in the mail. No return address, just my name written in a neat, familiar hand. Inside was a photo album, leather-bound, soft-edged, with a note clipped to the first page. I thought maybe you deserved your own version of our history. It was from my mom. The pictures were old, some faded, others clearer. But they were different from the ones I'd seen growing up. These weren't curated shots of Delilah's recitals or award ceremonies. These were quieter moments. Me in the backyard with a popsicle. Me teaching Delilah how to braid hair on a stuffed animal. Me holding a book while Dad pretended to snore for laughs. I turned each page slowly, unsure of what I was supposed to feel. These weren't staged. These were real. They weren't enough to rewrite the past, but they made one thing clear: I hadn't been invisible. Not always. Maybe forgotten, maybe overlooked, but not erased. And something about that mattered. I didn't call her right away. I needed time. I needed to understand what this gesture meant, not for her, but for me. I showed Theo, and he said gently, "It doesn't have to fix anything. It can just be what it is." That night, I sat on the porch again, the air cool and still, the photo album in my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I just let it be. There's something healing about not needing an answer, about accepting a gesture without surrendering your boundaries. 2 weeks later, I wrote her a letter. Short, honest. I told her I appreciated the album, that it was beautiful, that I wasn't ready for anything big, but I was open to something small. No promises, just a space for possibility. I didn't expect a reply. But a few days later, I got one. Handwritten. Careful. She said she understood. That she wasn't trying to make up for everything, just trying to give me back something she should have protected in the first place. That sentence hit me harder than I thought it would. Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't self-pitying. It was acknowledgement. And that's all I ever really wanted. Not perfection, not a rewritten script. Just for someone to say, yes, we did that. Yes, it hurt. And yes, you were right to say so. From there, things shifted, but gently. We didn't leap back into mother-daughter bonding. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. But we sent each other the occasional card, a photo, a recipe, tiny olive branches that didn't demand anything in return. And that was enough. Delilah reached out again too through a message this time. Said she was pregnant, that she wanted to try and do things differently with her child, that maybe someday if I was willing, we could talk. I read it twice. Then I wrote back just one line. When you're ready to listen, I'm here. No expectations, no pressure, just space. A clearing in the forest waiting for her to walk in if she chooses. And in the meantime, I kept living. I planted herbs on the kitchen windowsill. I finished 3 books in 1 month. I painted something that made me cry, and I didn't even know why. Theo and I started talking about starting our own family, not tomorrow, not next month. Just talking, dreaming, wondering. And for once, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need my parents to say I'd be a good mom. I didn't need Delilah to admire my choices. I didn't need my relatives' approval to validate my path. I had already chosen myself, and I was proud of that. One Sunday, we hosted a small dinner. Just a few friends, some neighbors, laughter that spilled across the patio like light. It wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And somewhere between the clinking of glasses and the smell of lemon thyme roasted chicken, I looked around and realized I had built something sacred, something mine. Not because I'd cut people off, but because I'd drawn the lines clearly. And those who respected them had found their way in, while those who didn't had drifted naturally away. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with no longer needing revenge, with not measuring your healing by someone else's regret. My parents still have work to do. So does Delilah. And maybe one day we'll sit down and talk. Really talk. Maybe we won't. But either way, I'm no longer waiting. I've stopped measuring my worth by how well I'm loved by those who once made me feel invisible. I measure it by how gently I hold myself now, how often I laugh without apology, how freely I walk into rooms without wondering if I belong, because I do. I always did. I just didn't know it yet. And now I do. So, if you ever wonder what happened to the girl who was skipped, who was overlooked, who stood quietly at the edge of every photo, know this: she walked out of the frame. Not in anger, not in sorrow, but in clarity. And in doing so, she became the main character of her own life. At last. Story 2. I was cut off from my Hispanic family 7 years ago because I married a white lawyer. My criminal relative needs legal assistance right now, and they're phoning me out of the blue because they think he could go to jail. My family cut me off at age 36 because I married a white man. Yes, I understand how that would sound in 2024. When my husband's family first learned about this crap, they were also incredulous. However, that's the way my family operates. They decided I was no longer worth talking to 7 years ago, and now they've come out of nowhere to seek for my assistance in saving my cousin. I swear, these people's fucking chutzpah. For example, when my daughter was born 3 years ago, they were unable to send a single SMS. But now, when the family needs a lawyer, they realized I was there. Correct. Because that's exactly how families are meant to function. It meant everything to me to grow up in a large Hispanic familial community. And I mean all of it. We bonded like glue despite the fact that we were by no means wealthy, regardless of the weather every Sunday. In the previous neighborhood, my abuela's small 2-bedroom house would house all 25 plus of us. People, food, and endless Spanish conversation would fill the space. My parents were devoted to maintaining our culture and keeping the family together. They talked about it nonstop, emphasizing the need for us to remain together and never lose sight of our origins. In particular, my mother took this nonsense very seriously. If we even talked English at home, she would lose it. Not much better was my dad, who would constantly lecture us about how our grandparents arrived here with nothing and had to start from scratch. The true meaning of all this family unity nonsense, however, was that if you wanted to remain a member of the family, you had to abide by their standards. It's like that. Honor the senior citizens. This basically implies follow their instructions. Never ever go from tradition and prioritize your family even if they are acting toxically. The final one. Yes, it is the reason I was expelled. Look, in order for this to make sense, I have to give you some background information about my family. 10 years ago, when I was in law school, I met my husband, Daniel. Our streams diverged. While he concentrated on criminal defense, I practiced corporate law. And no, it wasn't some romantic movie nonsense in which we fell in love the moment we met across the library. The real world was far less dramatic. We simply kept bumping into each other when we were studying or taking coffee breaks. At first, he really annoyed me a little. In class, he was the person who had to dispute over everything. But in the midst of all those coffee runs and late-night study sessions, he ended up being my best buddy. We would converse for hours on topics other than law school nonsense. When I initially informed my family about him, he was the first person who truly understood my strange sense of humor and didn't criticize me for wanting something different from what they had planned. You would think that I had informed them that I was relocating to Mars or something. My mom really lost it. How are you going to cope with his family? How about our principals? How can your children learn about their culture? Furthermore, my dad would not stop talking about our standing in the neighborhood, as in what the fuck. They were already worrying about potential grandchildren even though we weren't engaged yet. They had already become alarmed by my decisions before. When I decided to go to law school instead of teaching, which was supposedly more appropriate for a lady in our society, they had a similar breakdown. Look, in order for this to make sense, I have to give you some background information about my family. The majority of them are employed in fishing or farming. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, our family did not place a high value on schooling. We have been cultivating the land for years, according to my Uncle George. Why make the change now? Only 3 of us in my generation even attended college. I'm my cousin Maria, who worked as a nurse until quitting after getting married. Additionally, my cousin Alex left school after 2 years to do so. White people's colleges. Yes, I grew up hearing things like that. Not one of my female cousins works in a career. They are either stay-at-home mothers or are married to men in like circumstances and work minimal pay jobs. Carmen, my cousin, was offered a scholarship to go business school, but she declined since her boyfriend, now husband, did not want her to move to a different location. And guess what? Everyone is completely okay with all of this. All of them wed Hispanic men. For my family, it is basically all that counts. Since Daniel wasn't one of us, the fact that he held a legal degree meant absolutely nothing to them. It didn't matter that we were meant to be together or that he was successful. They just noticed that he was white. I made an effort to tell my parents how ideal Daniel was for me. For example, we both practice law, so we are aware of each other's hectic schedules and high stress levels. In addition, his family has been really friendly from the beginning. His mother even acquired the skill of making tamales. My mother, however, refused to listen. She embarked on this insane quest to connect me with every Hispanic man she could locate within a 50-mile radius. I'm not even making this up. She would constantly text me the details of strange guys. "You're the cousin of Tia Rosa's neighbor, and he recently returned back home with his son." "Okay, Mom," he said, referring to his job at the grocery store. She would also send me passive-aggressive texts about how Daniel indoctrinated me if I ignored these messages. She even began using the phrase "whitewashed by your white boyfriend," which really infuriated me. In an attempt to persuade me to meet her husband's buddy since he is such a fine Catholic lad, my cousin Teresa tried the same nonsense when she married a man from our church. She did this for months. I mean, really, what year are we in? I had to quit visiting home for the holidays and silence all of their texts because it got so horrible. In fact, Daniel's parents were fantastic about it. During the holidays, they always made me feel welcome at their home. In order to prevent homesickness, when Daniel proposed, I even learned how to prepare some of our traditional foods. I didn't immediately bother telling my family. Even so, what was the point? I was already forewarned by my brother's side sister-in-law about the reaction of the family when she revealed that she was seeing a Puerto Rican man who was at least Latino. Daniel's fluency in Spanish was irrelevant. He loved our food, actually tried to understand our customs, and learned it in high school and continued to study it in college. In fact, he was likely more familiar with our culture than my cousin Pablo, who says he's telling the truth but finds it difficult to communicate with them in Spanish. Being with Daniel was essentially treason, because he would always be seen as an outsider. Daniel initially wanted to try to talk to them in the hopes of resolving the issue. "They're your family," he said repeatedly. "They will eventually change their minds." However, I was aware. When my family feels like it, they can be real assholes. Furthermore, they wouldn't hesitate to say offensive things directly to his face. I was not going to allow that to occur. The planning of the wedding devolved into this enormous emotional mess. Because I moved to a better neighborhood after receiving my law degree, my aunt had already started spreading rumors that I was too good for my own people. One evening, Daniel and I had a lengthy discussion about it, and he raised an insightful point. Why was I acting as though I had to hide when I wasn't doing anything wrong? Better to just be upfront about it. So I called my mom to tell her about our wedding plans. Jesus Christ, I wasn't ready for the shitstorm that followed. She completely lost it. Started screaming about how I was killing her, how she'd failed as a mother. All that dramatic shit told me to quit my job and move back home ASAP like I was some teenager who needed to be grounded. I straight up told her I wasn't 6 years old anymore. Who'd follow her orders without thinking, but she wouldn't back down about canceling the wedding. I sent invites to my parents, my brother, and some cousins I thought I was close with anyway. These were people I grew up with, shared everything with. Like my brother and I used to be inseparable. We'd cover for each other when we snuck out as teenagers, help each other with homework, all that sibling stuff. My cousin and I were basically joined at the hip through high school, always talking about how we'd be each other's bridesmaids. But my family went absolutely ballistic when they got those invites, saying I was acting too white by just sending them invitations instead of involving them in every little decision. My mom called and said if I went through with a wedding, I'd be dead to her. My abuela cried about family shame, and my brother, who I seriously thought would have my back, totally ghosted me. He blocked me on everything. None of them gave a shit about what I wanted. All they cared about was that I was betraying our culture or whatever. We ended up having this small but really nice wedding in a park with Daniel's family and our close friends. Not going to lie. It hurt like hell when not a single person from my family showed up the next 7 years. Complete radio silence. No birthday texts, no calls, nothing. When we bought our house. Not even a single fucking word when we had our daughter 3 years ago. That one truly devastated me inside. I always believed my mom would at least want to meet her granddaughter. My daughter's first word was abuela, since I still talked about my mom to her, showed her photographs and whatnot, but nada, nothing. It took me a long time, but I learned to live with it. Had to go to therapy for a time to digest all that rejection. I had my own family now who truly loved me without all these silly stipulations. Then last week, out of fucking nowhere, my mom contacts me. I honestly thought it was a hoax at first. Her number hasn't come up on my phone in actual years. I responded because part of me was interested, but nah. She skipped straight over any usual greeting. Didn't ask how I was, how her grandchild was doing. Nothing. Just went directly to "we need your aid." It's about Ryan. Classic mom. Always getting right to what she wants. Allow me to introduce you to Ryan, the family's golden kid, and my mom's side cousin. Since day one, this boy has been lavished with attention. Our generation's first grandson. In their view, he could clearly do no wrong. He accidentally shattered my arm at a family gathering when we were children. And you know what? I should apologize to him for sobbing and spoiling the celebration, my folks advised me. Due to his fights, he was expelled from 3 separate high schools. However, the family consistently claimed that it was because the instructors were working against him. Even though he obviously done a lot of bad things as a child, it was suddenly such a gift to have a kid in the family when he broke up with his fiancée at the age of 17. Everyone simply turned their heads away. His parents took care of everything for him, covered all of his expenses, and secured him positions through family ties that he would later ruin. And because he believed his family would always take care of him, he just got worse as he grew older. This time, he made a huge mistake. Because he stole from his place of employment, he was arrested. He had apparently been embezzling money from the firm and falsifying checks for months. The family is now in crisis mode and he faces significant jail time. A lawyer who can help him escape this situation is what they need, and they seem to remember it after feigning my non-existence for 7 years. It turns out that their disowned daughter is a lawyer. How practical. Before making the call, my mom probably argued with herself for hours, attempting to determine whether it was worthwhile to seek the traitor for assistance in order to preserve Ryan. I was genuinely taken aback when my mother informed me of Ryan's predicament. They treated me like I was dead for 7 years. They now have the audacity to approach and request favors. They need anything from me and believe I'll immediately step in and help their dear Ryan like nothing ever happened, not because they regret what they did or miss me. I directly asked my mother why she was phoning. Is a lawyer out of his parents' price range? The aunts and uncles who have kissed his ass all his life, what about them? Are they unable to assist? Mom became defensive and said that despite their efforts, the matter was too complex. She smacked me with "your relatives" after that. I am aware that we have had disagreements, yet family supports one another. You're needed by Ryan. Playing the family card was the same woman who had previously told me that I was no longer her daughter. Daniel was furious when I informed him about the call. He recalls how deeply I was affected by their rejection. "They threw you away," he added. "And since it's convenient, they suddenly believe they can just re-enter your life." Absolutely not. Do you recall how much you relied on your mother during your pregnancy? Screw them. He is entirely correct. However, I can't get the past out of my head. For example, if I was ill, my abuela would make me soup. I slept off while listening to classic Spanish lullabies. But then I recall how quickly they interrupted me, how their affection was always accompanied with requirements that I no longer wanted to fulfill, how they put bigotry ahead of their own ancestry. I can't stop worrying about my family even though I know I won't be able to assist them. Strangely, I haven't felt this way in years, not even when they originally disconnected me. I feel as though all of the previous wounds I believed had healed were rekindled by that phone call. I was just curious if anyone else has experienced something similar. One update. Hello everyone, I appreciate all of the comments on my post. Since then, things have grown much more heated, so I just wanted to give you all an update. My mother phoned me again the same day I made this post. I told her via text that I couldn't assist and that she should quit harassing me. That caused a whole new shitstorm, so I suppose that was a big fucking mistake. She texted me back explaining that this was the first time they had ever requested assistance and that I was not willing to help. Then it hit me that I was avoiding my responsibilities. They have always manipulated everyone by using family responsibilities, so that final portion truly irritated me. I responded with an SMS. My sole obligations are to my kid and hubby, not to all of you who interrupted me because I put my pleasure ahead of your vacuous ego." God damn. She went totally crazy. Began writing really lengthy notes regarding my transformation. How I had changed from the daughter she had reared. You joined them. Nasty and wicked. You've become obsessed with your achievement. You have lost sight of your origins and origins. She hasn't even made an attempt to meet her grandchild in 3 years, so it's fucking ironic that she talks about forgetting family. When my uncle sent this lengthy voicemail about how the system is biased against our people and how I'm abandoning the community, and my aunt phoned crying about Ryan having 4 children to support, the messages became increasingly dramatic. My elder cousin, who I haven't spoken to in over 10 years, sent me the most absurd note. Despite his poor decisions, Ryan is not deserving of going to jail. You are aware of how our community's young men are treated by the system. Daniel and you may assist him. Even the cost of hiring a lawyer is not required. Simply act as his representatives. Yes, as it seems like a great idea to risk my legal license for Ryan. These individuals truly don't understand how the justice system operates. Ryan comes from my mom's side, so my dad has been quiet about it all, but I know him. He would be there demanding things from everyone else if this were a member of his family. In a heartbreaking message, my mother bemoaned how I was disappointing everyone. It seems that she had previously assured Ryan and his family that I would take up his cause and remove him from difficulties. It's typical of her, but I'm not sure why the fuck she believed she could make that commitment. I phoned her back after spending many hours listening to the voicemail. Told her directly. For Ryan, I won't jeopardize my job. Take me out of this mess, please. She erupted once again, accusing me of being rude and acting strangely. You treated me like one for 7 years after I shot back. When I needed you, where was all this familial devotion? For about 2 seconds, that silenced her, and then she returned with you. Us. You owe this family for all we did for you, including raising you, providing for your food, and helping you finish school. We gave up a lot for you. And you pay us back like this? That one really made me giggle. I covered my own college expenses. I put in a lot of effort to earn that partial scholarship, and I used my job to cover the remaining balance. Talking to you is like beating a dead horse, she said as she hung up. After that, I blocked her number. I had assumed that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Ryan himself gave me a call 2 days later. I didn't even recognize his voice at first. I hadn't heard it since he made jokes about Daniel being a gringo at that family gathering 7 years prior. He adopted this phony, modest demeanor. We haven't spoken in a long time, but I need your assistance. His voice alone evoked all of these memories of his constant favoritism by the family. While I was earning money for law school by working 2 jobs, everything was being handed to him. When he had his first child at the age of 19, his father purchased a home for him. Right there, I interrupted him. I'm sorry, but I'm unable to assist you, Ryan. That's when he became irate. You're a lawyer, though. You do this. All right, I made a mistake. It has nothing to do with me, but I apologize for whatever transpired between you and the family. That made me laugh. You're correct. It doesn't. He made one final attempt at guilt. Will you actually let me rot in prison? How could a sister do that? I simply hung up after snapping back like someone who's tired of being taken advantage of. Since then, it has been quiet, and to be honest, I hope it continues to be so. The last update. I apologize for not updating sooner. Due to the numerous safety and legal issues that arose following that altercation with Ryan, caution was required. I had assumed that the drama would end, but it hasn't. If my family is skilled at anything, it's causing more mayhem. This sporadic knock on my office door was the beginning of it. My assistant buzzed to let me know I had a visitor while I was going over a case. It was Ryan's wife, it turned out. She got wasted at that family gathering and started a fight with my cousin's girlfriend, and I haven't seen her since. This was already strange. She didn't waste time chit-chatting. It seems that Ryan's circumstances are far worse than my mother informed me. There is proof of more than simple embezzlement in the DA. They are investigating credit card scams, fraud charges, and fraudulent accounts. Instead of months, as they first claimed, he could spend years behind bars. I didn't even pretend to care because I was so over it by this time. What did I just say? And what am I supposed to do with that? She said they're offering him a deal if he cooperates and gives up names of the people he worked with. He might obtain a reduced sentence, but he doesn't trust the public defender to negotiate it correctly. That's why he needs me. Right then, I understood this wasn't simply Ryan being dumb with corporate money. This was organized crime crap. You could see it in how his wife paused when she was discussing things. So I told her straight out, I'm not touching this. Not even with a 10-foot pole. She got all pissy and was like, "Do you even care what happens to him?" I snapped back. "Do you even care what happened to me? You want me to put my job and my life at risk? No. Find someone else." Later that night, Daniel got this call from an old law school acquaintance who works at the DA's office. He casually inquired if I was representing Ryan's case. It turns out that in order to buy Ryan some time with the DA, his mother had been telling everyone that I was his lawyer. The buddy of Daniel wanted to caution us since it may significantly damage my reputation. I went crazy. I went after Ryan's mother over the phone. She made an effort to act as though I had only spoken about it to a select few. I believed I had interrupted her in the middle of the DA's pressure on him. "You believed you could influence me to accept the case. Are you aware of the potential harm this might do to my career?" In an attempt to justify herself, she said that she simply assumed that people would stop pursuing Ryan if they thought I was assisting. I threatened to take them all to court and hung up, but the harm was already done. In legal circles, word gets around quickly, and all of a sudden, there was a lot of talk about me allegedly defending my cousin in this criminal matter. It was necessary for Daniel and I to issue an official statement denying any involvement in Ryan's defense. It was humiliating all around. Then everything became truly spooky. I received a call from an unidentified number one evening. A person asked me whether I had anything to do with Ryan. He simply replied, "Let's say I'm his business associate and he owes me a lot of money," when I inquired who he was. Then he began discussing how I may be able to assist in resolving their financial issue and represent him as well, given that I was handling his case. When I informed Daniel that he was fucking furious, I hung up right away. Forced me to immediately block the contact information for every member of the family. Without further information, we considered making a police report. It would be ineffective. To ensure that our name remained out of this issue, we instead increased the security at our home and enlisted the help of our firm's legal team. Ryan was arrested once more a week later this time for breaking his bail terms. It seems that he met with some of the same individuals he was expected to turn in as part of his plea agreement. My family made one final attempt to coerce me into lending a hand. Even my mother, who claims to be my daughter, came to Daniel's office in tears and begged him to persuade me. Does she no longer value her family? I was done with all of this, Daniel informed her bluntly. That was it. I broke off all communication. No more texts, no calls, nothing. Ryan struck a deal with the DA, but he tried to play both sides, a coworker subsequently informed me. It went horribly wrong. Furthermore, he now faces considerably more time than he would have if he had been truthful from the beginning. As of the last time I heard, he was working with a public lawyer and is undoubtedly serving his sentence. My mother hasn't given me another call. Knowing her, though, it's likely that she will unexpectedly appear at some point, attempting to guilt-trip me once more. At least I'm positive I made the proper decision now, avoiding all of them and their chaos. Story 3. Due to false accusations made by my parents and sister after she was turned down for admission to her preferred university, I was expelled from college. They arrived at my house 7 years later to inform me that she had died in an accident. This will be somewhat lengthy. There is a lot of context, so please read all the way through. My parents manufactured a terrible and untrue story about me 7 years ago, which resulted to my expulsion from college 3 months after I enrolled. They only did this because my sister wanted to attend the same institution but was unable to do so, which shouldn't have been shocking, given that her grades were far worse than mine. However, when she and my parents learned that she had not been admitted into her ideal institution, they were still distraught for some reason. However, I had to see my folks. I wasn't shocked when they instructed me to make my own arrangements and refused to pay for my education because she had always been the golden kid. I wasn't prepared to give up, even though they were obviously making every effort to prevent me from attending the institution of my choice, simply because my sister couldn't. In order to get my grandparents to co-sign my school debt, I spoke with them. And thus, despite all chances, I found myself just where I was hoping to be. I had already left my parents' house by that point, as it was obvious that I was no longer welcome there. The atmosphere had gotten so hostile that I could tell they were prepared to expel me, though I doubt I had ever been there in the first place. So I went out alone before they could do anything. Unfortunately, my sister objected to our parents after discovering that I had still enrolled at that college. Because they take such things extremely seriously, she, a few of her friends, and our parents began circulating rumors that I was having problems in college. The authorities learned about it as soon as the rumors began to gain momentum, and I was ultimately reported. The police and other authorities conducted many investigations before discovering a marijuana cache in my dorm room somehow. It would have been easy for someone to enter the room covertly and put it there without being discovered. And I'm assuming my parents bought their way in, due to the fact that my roommate and I had several acquaintances who frequently entered and exited the room. Furthermore, there were already a lot of stories circulating about me selling drugs on campus, and some individuals even claimed that I had provided them the substance most likely as a result of bribery from my family or just because they wanted to be involved in the drama. In any case, the scenario appeared unfeasible, and despite mine and my roommate's knowledge of my innocence, the authorities did not view me favorably. Given the complexity of the facts, it would be hard to assign guilt for all of that. I pleaded and begged, but it didn't change anything, and I was ejected. And there is still much more to come if you believe that was the worst of it. I actually had nowhere else to go after being expelled from college. My parents had told my grandparents about my problems, and since they felt that there couldn't be smoke without fire, they didn't want anything to do with me. Furthermore, I don't really blame them for not believing me when I told them that I was innocent and had nothing to do with drugs because of the stash in my room, and the proof appeared indisputable at that time. In any case, all I had saved from working part-time jobs during my high school years had already been spent, so I had no money left. I was attempting to arrange things so that I could attend college. The student loan was useless because even though I had been expelled, I still had to repay the money that had already been used for my education. And I knew that I couldn't fail on it since my grandparents would then be responsible for paying for it. I only had a few months of grace left before I had to begin paying back the money that had already been paid for my tuition, and I was homeless and unemployed. Since marijuana was the only substance that had been discovered in my possession, not drugs or anything else, and since it had been decriminalized in my state, I was fortunate to avoid getting into too much legal problems. Nevertheless, that didn't really give me much optimism at the time. However, I now see what a great benefit that was. In any case, I had no one to turn to after being expelled. But fortunately, my roommate was really kind to me, and her parents hosted me for a few weeks. But since I didn't want to bother them, I accepted the first job I could find and began working as a grocery store cashier. I began saving money and living as frugally as possible. After a month, I thanked my roommate and her parents and moved out to take the cheapest apartment I could find. Even though the flat was tiny and claustrophobic, I had to live with 3 roommates in a horrible area. I took advantage of my circumstances. Since I knew I had no one else to rely on, I began taking on additional duties and refused to let myself relax even on the weekends. Since it was all a haze to me, I honestly don't know how I made it through those years. I just worked. Work was all I could think about, and the only time I would ever be content was when I got paid for my labor. I won't bore you with the less interesting aspects of my life, but I have had positions as a salesperson, waiter, bartender, receptionist, and so on. It was laborious. Even though it wasn't easy, I eventually moved out of that small apartment and into a nicer one. It was still a little small, but at least I didn't have to share it with anybody. Last year, I finally struck gold a few years ago, and I used my own funds to purchase my own home. I was a receptionist at a real estate company around 4 years ago. My main thought during the day was that I could accomplish this as well. I applied when a position became available, and I was fortunate to get hired. I realized that I had to take advantage of my chance, therefore I haven't looked back since. I was not a college graduate, like the majority of people there, but I did have social experience, so I suppose I was sufficiently endearing. Consequently, I began to move up the corporate ladder gradually but steadily. Finally, last year, I received a promotion to a higher managerial role, and I believe that in my whole life, I have never been more proud of myself. When selling people's homes for so long, I made the decision to purchase my own home when my promotion was confirmed. Not to boast, but I truly went from poverty to wealth since I earn 6 figures a year and am one of my company's finest and most appreciated workers. I've considered returning to school a few times to complete my degree, but apart from that, I'm very content with my life and the way it's gone. Naturally, I haven't spoken to my family in a few years, and they haven't made an effort to get in touch with me either. That's okay with me. I believe I'm much better off without them, and I don't really miss them. I do occasionally speak with my high school pals, and I'm still in contact with my college roommate, since despite only having known one other for 3 months, we got close. My sister and my dad are the only people I haven't missed in the last 7 years since they attempted but failed to destroy my life. Since I've made it very apparent to everyone that I don't want to hear about whatever they are going through, I haven't heard from them or about them, either good or awful. That has been respected by others. I was sadly unaware of my sister's death until my parents came to see me last week and shared the news that she had died a month ago. Since I hadn't communicated with them in 7 years, I was understandably shocked, and I had no idea how they had even discovered my residence. They later informed me that they kept bringing up the issue that they had already lost one daughter and didn't want to lose another, which is why they finally notified them after pleading with my roommate and her parents. Regardless, their first action upon seeing me was to give me a hug and express their pride. Even when I was younger, they never gave me credit for any of my accomplishments because they were afraid it would make my sister envious, so it seemed strange and out of place. Anyway, the news of my sister's death had come as a huge shock to me at the time. Despite all they had done to me in the past, I made an effort to treat them with kindness. We engaged in some small chat. Before people started calling me a doormat, they informed me about the automobile accident that killed my sister, and sobbed for a long while. I comforted them. The last time I had seen them was 7 years ago. Naturally, I was feeling conflicted about the issue as well. My sister was never someone I liked. I'm still a person, even though I hadn't exactly forgiven them for what they had done to me. When I was feeling so lost and bewildered, I simply couldn't bring myself to close the door on my mourning parents. It's okay, I could be a doormat if that's what many of my friends have previously stated. However, my parents eventually addressed the issue after talking to me for a while, telling me that they were come to apologize for everything that had transpired during my time in college, and that they should not have done what they did at the time. The fact that one of their daughters had failed to gain admission to the institution she desired had simply blinded them. They thus made the decision to correct everyone's perceptions after my sister accused me of being an addict and stated that I didn't deserve this. And they ended up destroying my life in the process. They said that my sister had been lying about the whole incident and that they were unaware that I had nothing to do with drugs until they recently talked to my roommate. They claim that she has been spreading false information about me ever since I moved out, and while they were initially hesitant to believe it, she eventually persuaded them that I was a drug addict who had allegedly plagiarized all of her essays to gain admission to college before she had even applied. Naturally, the college administration must have assumed that she was the one who had plagiarized it after that and dismissed her accordingly. Of course, it had not occurred. After talking to my roommate, they were now finally recognizing that she had made it all up. They now wanted to make amends and attempt to mend their strained connection with me. but I'm not sure why they stated it. 7 years after they attempted to destroy my life in the most heinous way conceivable, I simply lost it and began to yell at them, telling them that they had no right to come here and apologize. I informed them that I did not trust any of their falsehoods, and it was even more heinous that they were attempting to blame their deceased daughter for her inability to defend herself. I believed they were doing just that. I believed that my sister had persuaded them that I was a bad person who didn't deserve to attend the college of my dreams, and they were attempting to give the impression that they were unaware of my innocence. I had to be expelled by any means necessary. However, I didn't purchase it. I believed they had been aware of it the entire time and had somehow assisted my sister in getting me expelled, since I knew they were just apologizing because they had lost one daughter. I informed them that I did not accept their apologies and flatly accused them of it. Since they would have no one else to rely on to look after them in their later years or to let them play with grandchildren and other things, I was now their only hope. They actually appeared surprised when I began shouting for them to leave after I informed them that I could see right through them. They assured me that they weren't trying to blame anyone and that they were just being honest with me. As I was accusing them, they had nothing to do with any kind of bribery or planning in my room, and they honestly had no idea that my sister had been lying to them about me. However, I was not amenable to it. I yelled at them until they left, and then I called my roommate to talk to her because despite how much I love and appreciate her, I was a little irritated that she hadn't felt the need to inform me that she had met with my parents and had given them my contact information. When I confronted her about it over the phone, she admitted that she had done so, but only because they appeared to be in a desperate attempt to get in touch with me. I could see where she was coming from because, like me, she had found it extremely difficult to say no to grieving parents in that way, especially when they were using that against her. Even so, I wasn't pleased with the state of affairs. Nevertheless, she told me something really unexpected after I told her about my argument with my parents and explained everything that had happened. And ever since, I've been reflecting on my interactions with them. My parents apparently didn't realize I wasn't a real dealer or addict when she refused to tell them where I lived and accused them of ruining my life with her lies when I was in college. They seemed to genuinely believe what they had told her, which was exactly the same version of what they had told me. That clearly did not sit well with my roommate, who told them the whole truth. She filled them in on all the gossip that began to circulate during her time in college. I was expelled because of the people who suddenly came out against me and accused me, as well as the stash that was discovered in my room, even though it hadn't been there before. They initially rejected her, stating that they couldn't allow her to portray me as a saint or anything, despite their willingness to mend their relationship with me. However, the more she explained, the more my parents understood that she was speaking the truth and that they had been misled all along. They genuinely looked surprised when they found out the truth from my roommate, and even she seemed shocked because she had always assumed that they had been involved in everything. But judging by their reactions, she even started to believe that maybe it hadn't been them at all. Maybe my sister had been the only person behind all of it, and I just convincingly lied to everybody to make me look like the bad guy. And because they looked so surprised, she finally decided to give out my contact info to them so they could at least meet me in person and sort things out. She did apologize to me for doing it without consulting me first, but she thought that if she did tell me beforehand, I would refuse to meet them. And it's true, I probably would have refused. But keeping all that aside, whatever had to happen has already happened. We met and we got into that fight, and now I don't know what to think. I've realized that they might have been telling me the truth about not having anything to do with whatever happened in college. Apart from making the mistake of believing my sister, maybe she orchestrated the entire thing and they just believed and supported her in all probability. They genuinely meant their apology when they came over the other day, and I yelled at them for no reason. I feel bad about the whole thing, and I'm considering reaching back out to them somehow. But the only reason I haven't done that so far is because a tiny part of me thinks that whatever I did was long overdue, and I don't need to feel sorry about it. So, if I did not reach out and apologize to my parents. One update. All right, so I thought about the situation for a very long time, and I've decided that I'm not going to apologize to them. I don't even have to speak with them if I don't want to. I've spent 7 years of my life without them, and I think I can go the rest of my life without talking to them as well. A lot of my friends already think that I was a total doormat for letting them back into my life in the first place, and they believe that I shouldn't even have opened the door when they showed up. But that's already been done anyway. It's only my roommate who has a different opinion, and she thinks that I did the right thing by letting them in and at least getting the closure that I needed. Even if now I don't want them back in my life. At least they got to know the truth about my sister. And I also got to know that they were probably not even aware of what was going on with me or even what they themselves were doing because of all the lies that they had been told. I have to hand it to her. My sister was pretty conniving and planned everything very well when it really came down to it. If she had put that much effort into pulling up her grades, she wouldn't have been rejected from the college in the first place and nobody would be in this mess. We shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but, well, I think she pretty much brought this onto herself. Anyway, I'm not saying that it was all her fault. My parents were equally at fault for just buying into whatever she said without even verifying anything for themselves. I think they were just so convinced that their darling golden child could do no wrong, that at some point they actually started gaslighting themselves into going against the facts that they knew. For instance, would I have always gotten superior marks than her? Why would I feel the need to plagiarize her essays if they had any brains at all? They would have worked it out on their own. But like I said, it was wishful thinking on their side. They convinced themselves that I was into drugs, even though I had never displayed any symptoms or indicators of the same, simply so they could believe all the tales that they had been told and buy into these dumb schemes. They're not exactly innocent in all this, and maybe they didn't know the whole truth until lately. But that's really not a justification for having treated me so horribly their entire lives. And even if I somehow pardon whatever occurred when I was in college and put it up to the craftiness of my sister, I still can't forgive them for anything that happened before that. Like I stated, all my life I've been treated poorly by them, and no matter what I did, it was simply not good enough. Of course, I partly blame my sister for it. She was an attention-seeking brat already, and as she started becoming overweight in 6th school, she grew worse. I'm not trying to body shame anyone, but until 6th grade we were identical. But at a particular point in time, we entered puberty, and I think her urges were stronger than mine. She was absolutely out of control, and instead of attempting to get her to be healthy, our parents really pampered her, and she simply kept gaining weight. Naturally, she started becoming ridiculed in school, and people started calling her the Fat Martin, our last name. She was already extremely unpleasant to be around, which made her even more resentful. And without any justification, she began to despise me, acting as though I was to blame for everything. In retrospect, I suppose people ought to have been more understanding of her when her grades began to decline. She wasn't really nice to me, though. We had a lot of fights in the past. My folks were always on her side. They never acknowledged my accomplishments. Of course, their outright refusal to cover the cost of my college education was the last straw, only because my sister didn't want it even after I had my admission letter. I guess I wouldn't be able to forget any of it even if I could somehow force myself to forget the college event. It was when I left home. I struggled so much in the first several days after being expelled because of them. They might continue to feel horrible about whatever has happened since it's difficult to forget or forgive. I'm under no obligation to cheer them up. My pals are correct. For even bothering to let them in because they had lost a daughter, I had been a doormat. In actuality, their sole grievance was that they would now have to settle for the backup since they had lost the one daughter that mattered to them. Although that may sound harsh, I now realize that's the reality. I apologize for the outburst, but I simply wanted to find a way to release all of that hate and bitterness. I appreciate you reading through to the finish, and I hope to publish something more encouraging in the coming days or whenever I have more time. Goodbye, till then. The second update. Here's a little update on my parents' predicament. 2 weeks have gone by since they last came to see me, and a week has gone by since my previous post, so I've been attempting to put the incident behind me and resume my regular life. I was a little taken aback when they returned to my house today because they had been waiting for me to return home in their car in front of my house when I got home from work. They said they urgently needed to talk to me about whatever had happened and whatever they had lately learned about us when they spotted me getting out of the car. They said that the only way for any of us to go on would be to deal with the problem. To be honest, though, I had no interest in dealing with the matter. I was worn out from work, and to be honest, I had already handled the matter by being honest with them and asking them the truth. In order to avoid having to contact the police, I informed them that I had nothing else to say and that it would be best if they left. I was no longer tolerant of them, and during the last few days, my anger increased with each thought of them. They just tried to get in touch with me after 7 years. As a result, they lost one daughter, and it took them nearly 7 years to discover the truth about me and the inappropriate treatment I had received. The reality that a series of falsehoods caused them to wreck my life. I would never be able to get over it, and it was offensive that they believed that a small token apology would suffice. When they wouldn't go, I contacted the police directly in front of them because I couldn't stand it any longer. They then yelled at me for being unjust. They attempted to use the daughter card against me once more, claiming that they had already lost one daughter and were only attempting to keep the other one from leaving them. After telling them that they had never lost 2 kids, I genuinely started laughing at that comment. They only had my sister, and while I'm very sorry for her passing, I'm no longer their daughter. They've never treated me that way, therefore I never have been. I have also moved as far away from my past as possible, leaving them behind, particularly in the last several years. They then attempted to misrepresent my statements and said that I believed I was too good for them just because I had become extremely wealthy. I obviously didn't intend that. I had intended to convey that I was no longer emotionally attached to them and that I had moved on. Based on their previous treatment of me, I didn't have much to start with, but to be honest, I didn't feel the need to correct them at the time. I don't normally flaunt my riches because I think it's tacky, but to be honest, I've worked hard for it and have done everything without assistance from any family members. I now just agreed with my parents when they said that I was acting too nicely for them because I was wealthy. Since disputing with them would only result in me wasting more of my energy, and there was no sense in that I informed them that it was precisely what they believed it to be. They weren't the type of folks who would comprehend viewpoints that differed from their own. Furthermore, I deserve this since, as I mentioned, I worked hard for it. They simply began yelling at me after I admitted that until the police arrived and they were dragged off my land. I was finally able to unwind after they left, and I've made the decision to consult with a lawyer in order to request a restraining order against them. Since they haven't threatened me or anything, I'm not sure if I have any justification, but this is starting to irritate me. I sincerely hope they won't come back. I truly adore this location. Therefore, I really don't want to sell my house and relocate. I don't want to give it up because of my parents alone, since it's the first place I truly call home. I'm crossing my fingers then. I'm hoping they'll understand that I don't want them around and avoid me. Better still, they'll provide me with justification for requesting a restraining order against them. The third update. Hello, I haven't posted anything for a few months. I kind of forgot about posting here because I have nothing to contribute. In any case, you must have realized that not much has actually transpired during the last several months, when I requested that they be taken from my property by the police. My grandparents did contact me, but my parents didn't try to get in touch with me again. They told me they had always regretted not trusting me and apologized for everything when I declared my innocence to them. Since they had been there for me when I needed them and they had every right to doubt me based on the evidence that had been smuggled into my room, I had nothing against them. I thus pardoned them. And because I had too many memories of my sister, I found out from them that my parents had sold their property and relocated to the suburbs, even though I don't precisely stay in touch with them often. I suppose I can see their perspective, but to be honest, I'm simply relieved they're far away. In my case, I've essentially gone on with my life. My job is doing well, and despite a recent setback, my closest buddy and former roommate and I are getting back on track. I doubt that my family and I will ever be close. I only have forgiveness for my grandparents. Since they ultimately still left me and my other family members, I don't plan on becoming close to them. It's okay, even if I was never really close to them in the first place. I'm going to be content with my life and start my own family. For now, everything is good. I sincerely appreciate you, everyone, remembering me. Drop your story in the comments. And if you've ever been underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe. We see you, and we've got more stories like this coming every week. Thanks for watching.